Yeah. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Roses and Rhetoric, number 62. Joining me, our special guest co-host, the no less charming, no less Jo Matz.
Glad to be back.
Joe Stanford, unfortunately, is not able to be with us today. He is fighting an illness. We wish him a speedy recovery. I'm sure that he'll be back on the show next weekend. And I'm sure, as always, we'll have a story to tell. But today is not an episode for stories, Joe. It is an episode for movies. You were off last week off of our show, but it is my understanding that you had some time to watch a couple of films between now and then. So today will probably be a short episode as we do what you and I do best, which is to spend too much time talking about movies that too few people have ever seen. No, I think this will be a good episode. Probably. So, Joe, I'm turning over to you when you're ready. Our first movie for discussion.
So the first one I want to talk about today is Belfast, which is shaping up as one of the front runners for the Oscars this year. It's definitely in the running for a Best Picture win. It will 100% be nominated for Best Picture, probably a Best Director, a couple acting nods. So this one is going to be up there. This is the time of year where I'm always trying to catch everything that's making top 10 lists. It's going to be up for awards. So this is one I was glad to catch. The movie's Belfast. It's in theaters right now. It's the only place you can see it as far as I know. It's about a 9-year-old named Buddy and the rest of his working class Belfast family as they navigate the beginnings of the Troubles in Northern Ireland and specifically Belfast in 1969. So on the Is It Good front, Kenneth Branagh's ode to his childhood and the city he was born in is charming and heartfelt, but somewhat slight. I think the film's biggest strengths and weaknesses are largely the same, and it's Branagh's choice to really filter it through the perspective of Buddy, which makes sense because Kenneth Branagh literally was a 9-year-old in 1969 Belfast. So you can see why he does that, and it really helps bring out the charm in the film. Like it opens up on like panning through the street that he lives on. We see Buddy playing. It's a great time. One of the key things, obviously, is Jude Hill, who plays the kid, is really good. It's his feature film debut. Branagh writes him as a real kid, which I think is always important in these situations, where Buddy's just focused on scheming stuff up with his cousin, or really following her schemes, and then getting closer to his crush at school as he is the rising troubles in Northern Ireland. And Hill plays him really naturally. There's none of the preening for cuteness that we sometimes see with kid performers. Like this movie doesn't work if he's not good, and he is. The larger problem with this perspective, though, is it kind of flattens certain situations and characters. Like, we don't have a great understanding of what's causing the troubles outside of some people are Catholic, some people are Protestant. There are obviously, if you have any basic knowledge about, there's larger issues about England ruling over parts of Ireland or all of Ireland at one point that we don't really get to see touched on. His parents don't really get a lot of, like, they get a decent amount of screen time, but I don't think we get an overly great understanding of who they are because of that. I do think the performances by the parents are good. Jamie Dornan, probably best known for 50 Shades of Grey, is much better here than he was there, unsurprisingly. And Katrina Balfe as his mom, she is also known for steaming romances in Outlander. She's great. She's probably going to get an Oscar nomination, and I think it would be deserved. But yeah, I think that part kind of lessens it, just because we don't have a full understanding of exactly why this stuff is happening. We only catch kind of like bits and pieces of his parents arguing about whether or not they should stay in Belfast or move to England, where his dad has a potential job. Branagh does a better job of expanding on the grandparents, which are Judi Dench and Ciarán Hinds, which is just like a casting coup to get the two of those people to play the grandparents in a movie. I don't think people realize how old Judi Dench is.
Yeah, she's fucking old. killed James Bond. They fucking killed her a couple of movies ago.
Probably because they thought she would be dead by now in real life.
Yeah. The only Bond woman that died of natural causes. I'm kidding. She was, of course, shot, but Anyways, Joe, go ahead.
3 days ago in real life, she just turned 87.
Oh, goodness
And
gracious.
she's still as sharp as ever, still very good. Hines, though, I think is probably the highlight overall of the movie. He's 68, so he's actually almost 20 years younger than his wife in the movie, but you don't really know that in the film. Hines is actually a Belfast native, along with Dornan, so we do get some real Northern Ireland guys in this movie. But this is as good as I've ever seen Ciarán Hinds in anything, and he's a good actor. He's gonna get nominated. He probably has a decent shot at winning Best Supporting Actor this year. We'll see how it goes. But outside of that, Branagh does some interesting things visually. He shoots most of the film in black and white. It opens up in color, showing you modern day Belfast, then cuts back. And everything in 1969 Belfast is black and white, except when they're going to see like plays or movies, which I think is kind of an interesting choice. It tells you that for him, that was always an escape, especially during this time in his life when things started to go upside down, that always you could escape into film. And that's, I think, probably what drove Branagh in part to performance. Like we see the whole family watches Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, which is a nice little moment, especially just watching them all react to the car flying in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang is pretty
great movie.
I can't say I can't remember ever seeing it, so I'll take your word for it.
Oh, fantastic movie, but yeah.
And then the other thing with the kid's perspective, again, where it works and doesn't work is there's two scenes in particular in this film which don't feel real. They feel a little bit removed from reality, that they're extra, like more how he experienced it as a kid versus what would have actually happened. And one of those involves a big moment where it seems like someone could die. And earlier in the movie, they watch a little bit of High Noon, so they use the same music, which is a nice touch. But it just comes off, I want to get into exactly what happens in the scene, but it comes off as a little ridiculous, which is not what you want for a scene where it's supposed to be like lives are on the line. This is Belfast 1969. And then there's another scene where it works, where his dad is singing at this party and his mom's dancing. And then, you would imagine that his like working class dad can't actually sing the way that the character does in this scene. But it works just for like bringing out the joy of what these characters are experiencing in this moment, the catharsis of it. So it really, I could go back and forth a little bit on that. I do wish he'd expanded a little bit more, again, specifically on the parents and a little bit on the situation. I think we've seen other movies. Mike Nichols? Let me double check here. But 20th Century Women is this movie from the last decade. I think it was 6 or 7 years ago. Oh, Mike Mills is the director. And Mills has a movie I'm going to try to see in the next couple of weeks with Joaquin Phoenix. Come on. But in that movie, he looks at, kind of his youth to a degree, but it's really more focused on his mom, played by Annette Bening. And I think it's a richer film for the way that he expands on, like, obviously he doesn't know exactly, you can't write word for word what your parents went through, but you can get a vibe, you can kind of expand on it, really look at the world through their eyes. And I think that can make a text or film richer. I think Branagh could, if he'd done that successfully, I think this movie deepens a little bit. Overall, though, it's still a good movie. It's definitely one where most people's parents are probably going to love this movie, which is, again, why it's an Oscar frontrunner. Because most Oscar voters are white people in their 60s. So if you're like us, that's our parents right there. So overall, I'd give it a B+. Some other films to watch in that vein, again, I love 20th Century Women. I think that's one to check out. If you want to do a throwback, To Kill a Mockingbird is an interesting one with some similarities. And then more recently, Jojo Rabbit.
I was going to say that. Damn it, Joe, you took my tie-in to Sound Intelligent. I was going to do, because Jojo Rabbit was The Eyes of a Kid, right? So that would have been.
Right. That's another one I feel similarly to this one, where
but that movie, Jojo
I
Rabbit
like
was
it overall.
inherently surreal, though, right? I mean, like it was.
No, it was. It's doing obviously a different thing.
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
it's looking at some similarities. Obviously, as bad as the Troubles were, they were not the Holocaust.
Right. They weren't that troubled, so to speak.
But yeah, looking at everything through a kid's perspective, through a very troubling time in the country that they lived in. Like this movie, it's a movie. Jojo Rabbit, I felt mostly worked, but I can't say I was someone who was all in on Jojo Rabbit the way that a lot of people were, including many Oscar voters.
I thought Jojo Rabbit. I never quite get this quote right, and I think I'm probably putting some words in the critic's mouth, but I think I can get the gist of it right. There was a movie that came out, probably over 10 years ago, and it was about, and you probably know more about the movie name. I won't remember it right now, but it was about a German concentration camp guard who was illiterate, and it was like this big secret that she was illiterate. And you know what I'm talking about? The writer, something along those lines.
Oh, it's The Reader, right?
The Reader. Yes, The Reader. Okay.
With Kate Winslet.
Kate Winslet, and yeah. So I saw that movie. I remember reading one of the reviews for it on the Wikipedia page, and it was something to the effect of like, this is kind of a weird story to tell because it's like, when are people going to stop using the Holocaust to tell interesting stories? You know, and it kind of cheapens the Holocaust in some way. And I kind of felt with Jojo Rabbit, it was like, it felt weird. I kind of had the same reaction to Jojo Rabbit that I had to watching Inglourious Bastards, which is kind of like, it's weird to make the whole event kind of this joke because, of course, in real life, Hitler wasn't killed, and he did. I mean, he killed himself later on, but he wasn't killed in a raid. The war continued, and the Holocaust. It felt, and kind of with The Reader, I kind of got the same impression of like, why are we using the Holocaust to talk about like irony or something? You know, it just feels kind of removed. And it kind of the same thing with Jojo Rabbit, where it's like, all right, it's this funny, quirky story, but why are we using the Holocaust to be quirky? It just seems kind of weird to me to be doing that. And
yeah, I can kind of see it both ways, where it's weird, but I appreciated Taika Waititi's kind of take on just like,
I thought it was a good movie. But
what should we do with fascism? And it's like, mock it because it's stupid. Like,
well, there is, and this is a thing that I think is worth remembering, is that there is a kind of inherent in any kind of totalitarian. This is why a movie like The Death of Stalin works. The death of Stalin obviously wasn't real. That's not how the events happened. But it was absurd, like the events in real life were also absurd. You know, there's in a way the character in Jojo Rabbit, the Hitler character, that Hitler wasn't like that, obviously, but Hitler was absurd. I mean, there's a craziness to how the people actually were that it makes these crazy motifs work. It's almost like a different side of the same coin, almost, or something along those lines. So I can see it both ways, but I get the critics' message.
But also with Jojo Rabbit, one issue I had, which comes up with, I think, on the same vein of your kind of your issue with it, is that like the Sam Rockwell, Alfie Allen characters in that movie, where it's like, these are Nazi soldiers, but then we're like supposed to kind of like them because they're like kind of good guys who are gay lovers, but like it just felt like there's a lot going on there that just kind of, it felt like that was very much just like, this is the sort of thing that Taika does, and so it's happening in
that's I forgot about Sam Rockwell's character. You're right.
I don't know how much we should be empathizing with a guy who, for however much he might have doubts about their actual cause, still chooses to end up like fighting in the war and is training like Hitler youths. So I think that's kind of where I was like, we might have lost the thread a little bit there. But
which, if anything, was just a blatant contradiction of Western labor practices, right? I mean, my God, child labor. I mean, that's just never. Whatever. Say what you want about the tenets of National Socialism, Joe, but working children. I mean, I think this goes too far for anybody. I think. No. Let's talk about Belfast a little more. So let me, having not seen the movie, let me offer you a defense of or not a defense, but a rebuttal, probably too strong a word. What if I were to argue that the perspective of the child kind of innocence about the world around them, I think is probably
Right.
more accurate for the average person than the kind of historical view that you wish they had taken. And the example I would give you is 9/11, where I think if you were telling the story of 9/11, it would be a mistake to attribute to the average American a deep understanding of the geopolitical events that led to 9/11 happening.
Sure.
It would be much more like how I would imagine many children saw it, certainly how I felt at the time, and I imagine many people did as well, of we were attacked.
Yeah.
And it wasn't this thing that we put in a kind of historical quote unquote context. It was an attack that happened. And I would imagine, I don't knowing very little about the troubles in Northern Ireland, I would imagine that for many people, these were events that they didn't have a deep understanding of, but that they still had to live through nonetheless. And so there was a kind of, I don't understand what's happening, but I have to get through. And I think that's how a lot of kids feel. But I also think it's how a lot of, like, that's how I, as an adult, I mean, I'm 29, hopefully I'm an adult, but that's how I feel about a lot of geopolitical things going on around me as well. Like, there are things I have to get through. I don't know, like, cause them or what leads them to happen.
Sure.
I don't have a deep understanding, but there are events nonetheless that we have to make sense of. Is that a side? I mean, is that something that's possible here, or am I being
No,
ridiculous?
I think that's a fair point. I guess to more narrow down exactly what I would have liked to have seen more of. It's not like I want Kenneth Branagh to like give us the overarching like exactly what was causing the troubles and whatnot. I just feel like we get snippets of his parents having discussions. We
Right.
get the Buddy's cousin, who's a girl who's a couple of years older than him. She seems to have like hints of like being more like there's a teams here. Like his parents are very open about like there's not teams. Like our neighbors who are Catholic, because they're a
Mhm.
Protestant family, like they're our neighbors. There's nothing wrong with them being Catholic. But like his cousin kind of definitely is more involved in like the idea of like, oh, the Protestants are kind of, and it's not like she's espousing like hate speech to him or something, but it's more along the lines of like she wants to feel involved in other things, and then she's kind of pulling him along on certain stuff, and
Mhm.
they never really get overly involved in anything. But it's like, all right, if she feels this way, then I feel like her parents probably have somewhat of these feelings, and
Mm.
we never see them. What if we just have a scene where like his parents have a discussion with like whichever one of them who's sibling is this cousin who obviously they're related to her parents because
Right.
that's
Right.
his cousin.
Right.
So just getting more of a dynamic beyond like most of the neighborhood is chill, but you have these kind of like outside angry Protestant guys who are wrecking havoc. I just feel like it would have been more interesting to see some of that divide. And I think it also would have given you more of an idea of like why there was this push. Like we see why they want to stay to a degree. This is their home. But also some of the reasons why they want to leave beyond just there's trouble. I think there's more drama to part of your family sees this differently than you do. Which maybe that's not really true to Kenneth Branagh's experience. So I don't think he should have necessarily had to force things in there. But we would have had a better idea if the world of his parents was expanded on a little bit.
You mentioned in the review working class. Now, I again know nothing of the trouble, so if this makes me sound like an idiot, then I am. But I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
was there a class element to the troubles, and then does them being working class contribute to the side or how they viewed the conflict taking place? And
I also,
even just in the
yeah.
film, does them being working class have consequences for them than if they were poorer or wealthier or whatever?
So far as the actual divisions within the troubles, as far as I know, there was not any heavy class element. There might have been. I'm not, expert either. I know the basics of it. I do think that like having your neighborhood get attacked was probably more relevant to working class people during the troubles than most wealthier people. Is that you probably, if you were in a wealthier neighborhood, you're probably less likely to see your neighbor's house set on fire or something, or stuff
Or
thrown through their window.
yeah, or you were able to move easier because you had money to leave.
Yeah. But it definitely, their being working class does play into the film because the the dad has some sort of financial troubles about like paying off, I believe, a old tax debt, and also that's a part of his reasoning for also wanting to leave is because his job. He's actually going back and forth between England and Ireland and for his job, and he has the potential to just stay over there and get a better paying job. And so that does play into whether or not they're going to leave Belfast, which is one of the key points of the film. So it does play into their story. I'm not sure that it overly plays into how the Troubles happen, but again,
Broader.
I know the very basics of the Troubles. I could not give you a deep breakdown of it.
So you described the black and white with hints of color every now and then, of course, a film technique made famous by Sin City. No, I'm talking about Schindler's List. CJ, I've also have seen in movies. No, did you find that kind of thing? Was it distracting, or did you think it played well in the film, the cinematography of doing the color?
I definitely appreciated it because again, I think if he shoots it all in color, if he shoots everything in black and white, I don't think we get the sense of exactly what that entertainment as an escape meant for his family, but particularly to Buddy. And then we can look at that as obviously Buddy is kind of a stand-in for Kenneth Branagh. So I think that does a good job of kind of literally illuminating what that meant for him. So I thought that was really effective. Again, I think this is a well-made movie. I just kind of wanted more from it. Again, like, it's good. I would recommend it. I'd say, again, go see it, especially if you want to take your parents to something. But when a movie gets kind of the hype of like this could be the Oscar winner, I always want it to be great. I'd say probably 30 or 40% of the time it is, and then the rest of the time I'm usually in this boat where I'm like, this is a good movie. If it wins stuff, I'm not angry. I'm just not excited.
Well, you mentioned child actors, and I feel like the I think it's very hard. Well, I don't even want to say that. I think we all have seen movies with child actors that were not great. Like
sure.
that. We've all seen that, and but it sounds like in this movie the younger actors did quite well. It doesn't seem like they were phenomenal performances. And so, do you think I maybe said earlier on in the review, do you think the kid actors, the child actors, are going to be nominees for the Oscars as well?
My guess would be no. Buddy is really the only kind of role with real meat to it. Again, he's got an older brother, but he doesn't get a whole lot to do in the film. His cousin is kind of more of a comedic element for the most part. And then I'd say, he doesn't really have, actually, now that I think about it, like a best friend he's hanging out with a lot of the time or anything like that. So he's also got the crush, but she's mostly just, the crush that he's trying to sit to. Like one of the things that's going on is the teacher, based on the grades in the class, the kids with the best grades are sitting closest to her, and the kids with the worst grades are sitting furthest away, which to me seems like not a good thing to do as a teacher, having worked at schools and some basic knowledge of how kids do based on where you sit them. But so his crush is like very smart and sitting towards the front of the class, and so he's trying to work his way up
to the front of the class.
Well, which is his grandfather gives him some advice on that, which is like, if you write messy with your math, your teacher might give you the benefit of the doubt on some of the numbers.
That's a good point.
Which is good advice.
Yeah, solid advice.
But so I would say, no one else really has enough to do. And I guess they could push for him in a supporting role because for whatever reason, it seems like that's something you can do, especially with child actors, is you can be like, this kid's clearly the lead of this movie, but we'll just say they're supporting and people will listen to that. Like Haley Steinfeld in True Grit, I believe she was supporting actress, even though she's the main character of True Grit, stuff like that. But again, I think in this, because of the way it's going to break down, again, I think they're going to push Kieran Hines as the clear standout for best supporting actor in this film. So I think most of the energy along the lines will be going for him, and then Katrina Balfe for supporting actress. So I don't think he'll get nominated Jude Hill, but he is very good in this movie. So, hopefully he continues to do well. I know he's got a few other projects lined up, so we'll see what happens with him.
I always like when movies, when they're kind of on the backdrop of a much more serious event, show these like little trinkets of personality. So like in the background of The Troubles, you have this kid like, I gotta get this girl to like me though. And I always like things like that because that's in real life, that's what happens. You have these horrible events happening, but life goes on. Like there was this great documentary about these people in the Holocaust in the concentration camps who were like carrying on an affair, and it was like, hey, like that's the way it works. It's even in the concentration camp. It's like, well, love finds a way, and it's always good.
Right.
To see
People have to find a way to survive, right?
Yeah, it's life is fractal, and it's always complex, no matter no matter what scale you look at. This sounds like a good movie. It's in theaters right now. There's actually a decent chance I might be seeing it. I'll be visiting my in-laws over winter break, and they're big movie buffs, and so this probably will be one that we will go see. But I have to see Matrix Resurrections. That's what I'm looking forward to seeing.
First and foremost,
I have to see it. I'm keeping my fingers crossed for it. I love the first Matrix, like everybody else. The other two, I'm kind of like, it's fine. But I'm hoping this one is good.
I like Reloaded a lot.
Reloaded is good. Reloaded
the
is
action,
good.
The freeway scene in that is, I think, the highlight action-wise of that entire trilogy.
Yes.
Resurrection, or is this one Resurrections?
No, you're thinking. Well, Revolution was the third one.
Revolutions.
Yeah.
Revolutions, not so much.
Yeah, that one was not. It's basically the less time you spend in the Matrix, the worse the movie gets. And then I think Revelations is, they have all this fighting outside and Zion. It's like, it's not so good. It's not so good. Well, Joe, any other movies that you've seen you want to touch base on?
So oddly enough, this year seems to be heavy on films either using black and white completely or just utilizing it for parts. And another one of those was The French Dispatch, which is the new Wes Anderson movie.
Oh, I want to see this one. Okay, good. So tell me about it. The French Dispatch. Okay, yeah. So this is the perfect example of a trailer where you watch the trailer and you think, what the hell
don't know what's going on.
What the hell is going on? Now, I'll see anything with Bill Murray in it. I'm a big Bill Murray fan. So, I mean, obviously, I'm going to see this one too. And I also love the director. But yeah, I saw the trailer. My wife and I are like, what the hell is that movie? What is the plot? We have no idea.
So it's kind of built around the idea that Bill Murray is this editor of the French Dispatch, which I guess his character is based on the co-founder of the New Yorker. But so really, we kind of get an opening with him and a closing with him and the rest of his writers and stuff. But the heart of the film is 3 different vignettes, which are about articles written for his magazine or periodical. And so you get one which is about a incarcerated artist played by Benicio del Toro, where he's in prison and he has this kind of weird relationship with a guard played by Leah Sudol, where they'll sleep together and he'll paint her, but his paintings are all very abstract. And then Adrian Brody is this other prisoner on tax evasion, but he's an art dealer, sees the painting, and then once he gets out, he buys the painting for I think it's like 250,000 francs, some huge amount. And Del Toro's in prison for another, I don't know, 10 years or something because he murdered 2 guys in a bar, decapitated them. And so he's exactly. And so he's in prison. Adrian Brody gets out and he starts kind of building him up in the art world. And so he's become this sensation. And so that kind of follows them along. And then Tilda Swinton is kind of narrating it for us as she's giving a presentation in some auditorium. And then she also is writing about this for Bill Murray. I think that one was good. I kind of felt like it was the slightest of the. Well, the first 2 are a little slighter than the third one, I think. But that was probably my least favorite. I still liked it. I'm a big Wes Anderson person, though. This is very much a movie where if you like Wes Anderson, you'll probably like the movie. And if
Okay,
you've
good.
not bought in on Wes Anderson, this is probably not the one to jump into.
Who doesn't like Wes Anderson?
Um, I mean, there's people out there. I'm
Oh,
not friends
well,
with them, but
I
they
wouldn't be friends with
exist.
them either. My goodness.
The second one, which I thought was the funniest one, is Francis McDormand's journalist following these student revolutionaries, and Timothy Chalamet
That's
is
what I'm
kind of
thinking
one of
of.
the leaders of the revolution, and he's like writing a manifesto that she then proofreads because they also start sleeping together. And then he also is like playing, I don't know, like the dean or something in chess, and then later he's playing the mayor in chess. And there's this great bit where like they're playing in chess, but like they're playing it because there's like a barricade. They're having to like announce their moves across the barricade.
Oh,
And then
so it's
eventually,
correspondence chess. Okay, good.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so eventually, though, there's conflict within, naturally, of course, there's conflict within the student body about what they want to do and blah, blah, blah. And so the mayor declares a forfeit by them and tear gasses them. So
Jesus.
that one is super ridiculous. I thought it's like there was bits in that I laughed harder at that than like anything I've seen this year. And then the last one is Jeffrey Wright is a food journalist who's going to a dinner with the police chief because there's this police chef who's supposed to be amazing. But during the course of the meal, the police chief's son gets kidnapped by Ed Norton and some other ne'er-do-wells. And so there's this whole hostage situation and a chase. And that one is also fantastic. It actually, despite all the ridiculousness of it, that's the one that I think kind of has more of a beating heart to it, where there's a little bit of emotion there. But so those three take up the vast majority of the film. I just thought it was, in general, a great time. This is definitely in the running for one of my top 10 movies of the year. I'd say this one's like an A- for me.
Yes, good. I love Wes Anderson. I'm always excited when you first see the opening of the trailer, like in the first 5 seconds, you're like, "Oh, good, it's going to be a Wes Anderson movie." And then, like, sure enough, it just is because it's just so
And
distinct. I was like, "Oh, good, I get to see him again." So I mean, I'm
yeah,
definitely looking
and
forward to it.
again, this I guess I really just went over the plot with that. He goes back and forth between black and white and color. I'd have to watch it again to really see like
Is
if
it
there's
only
any
in theaters or is it also on?
that is, as far as I know, it's also only in theaters. I know it came out earlier than Belfast though, so it's probably winding down in a lot of places, and maybe it'll be on demand to like rent or something soon here. Although some of these movies on Amazon you can pay like $20, so I don't know if these ones are fall into that. But yeah, just a stacked cast all around. I mentioned a number of the major actors. Christoph Waltz shows up for like 10 seconds. You've got Liev Schreiber also shows up for
Oh,
like
really?
five lines. Saoirse Ronan, who's now like a 3 or 4 time Oscar nominee, she's just a prostitute or a sex worker that is there around the kidnapping. She has a really small part. Yeah, Henry Winkler, Bob Balaban. There's just a bunch of people, and in the newsroom, which again doesn't take up that much time in this movie, you got Elizabeth Moss, Jason Schwartzman, and Angelica Houston. Owen Wilson does give you a brief overview of the like town that they're in
Oh, okay, good.
as like a piece, which is fun. So it's stacked cast, the classic Wes Anderson humor. Um, some of the I feel like he did this in shoot, why am I blanking on Grand Budapest?
Right.
Where in that scene where it like cuts away from like reality to like I can't remember. There's like a skiing scene in that where like Willem Dafoe's chasing after them, where it's no longer filmed like live action. And so this one also has a car chase where it becomes animated. And
Oh,
so
I
it's
see.
just
Right. I see what you're saying.
which again, again, this is just a movie where if you like Wes Anderson, you're gonna like
Right.
the movie. So
Right. It'd
I
be
love
really
Wes
bad.
Anderson. So
Yeah, I agree. I love Wes Anderson too, but like it would be really bad if like Wes Anderson was like, I'm gonna make a movie about the Rwandan genocide, you'd be like, that's not what you should be making movies. Because it'd be like some weird, goofy, like, murdering scene or something. You'd be like, I don't think
Right.
that's good.
Like we said, like we mostly liked Jojo Rabbit.
Yeah, but it's a
We
little
still know
bit
bits
like,
of it. We're like, all right, Taika, maybe rein it in. So
yeah,
yeah, I
it's
don't think
explained,
Wes
but yeah,
Anderson should.
it's
He's
like,
good at family dynamics. You can do some drama with Wes Anderson. I don't know that he should do overarching things about
I feel like you could do
the
a good Cold
forcings of the
War
world.
movie or something where there was like all these like crazy ideas at the
Mm,
time. I think that would be a good movie
I
for him
I
to
could see
do.
him doing something
Like
along
some
those
like
lines.
stupid spy movie or something where I think that could be good for him. Something
Right.
to
Well,
watch.
like you mentioned, we got the death of Stalin.
Oh right, yeah,
Um,
like that movie. Like that could be Wes Anderson-esque, not really in the same fuzzy
right. It
funny
would
way,
be
but in
right. There'd be
absurdity
less
way.
swearing, but
Yeah, it'd be and a lot more yellow. His
yes.
usual color palette, but
But yeah, so that was when I saw, and then one that everyone can see and is not in the Oscar running, but still very very fun is The Harder They Fall on Netflix, which was
is that
James
one about?
Samuels, the writer director. It's basically just he took every kind of like major or semi-major like black person who existed, well, actually existed in like the old West, and then he's just like, I'm putting them all in a movie where they try to murder each other. And so on the one hand, you've got this outlaw gang, and like none of this is like the characters are real. It's extremely fictionalized. No one should watch this movie and think that they actually know things about who these people were.
But
Like
it's a
Idris
western,
Elba's,
but they're all black. Is that what you're
yeah,
saying? Okay, all
yeah.
right.
So it's Idris Elba is the villain. Again, the real life guy he's playing was hung at 19 years old. So, and Idris Elba, both in real life and in this movie, is clearly playing someone in their like late 40s.
Right.
So again, not historically accurate. Most of these people never interacted, but all of the bad guys were real life criminals. All of the good guys, even though a lot of them are portrayed as like semi-criminal in this movie, they were not criminals in real life. Although one of them was involved in a Native American genocide, but that's a it's a whole
But
other
yeah,
thing to
but that
talk
was
about
general.
there.
At the time, that wasn't a crime, so that's different. It's a different category.
But I mean, he just cast this movie fantastically with a lot of the best black actors working today. Jonathan Majors, who's really kind of had a meteoric rise last couple of years, is the main character who's trying to get revenge on Idris for killing his father. So Jonathan Majors, in case people don't know, I first saw him in The Last Black Man in San Francisco, which I highly recommend. That's one of my favorite movies. That's probably my favorite movie that came out in the last 3 years.
Wait,
He's
really?
the standout performance in that. Yeah.
Why haven't you told us about it on this fucking channel?
I've mostly been trying to get newer movies out. So
God,
maybe
over
once
here
we hit
talking
through,
about what movie? The Eternals. You're talking about
so I'm
the
trying to
last.
keep it relevant to what people are watching right now.
God,
But Last Black
goodness.
Man San Francisco, I might cover it once we get into like February, where all only trash movies are coming out. Maybe I'll go back and cover that one. But he's fantastic in that. He had a pretty big role in Defy Bloods, which was Spike Lee's movie from last year. Lovecraft Country, he was the main character, and then
Oh, okay. So then I know
he
who it is.
he is now set up as the primary villain going forward in the MCU. Which spoiler alert if you haven't seen Loki, guys, but he shows up in the last episode of Loki, and he will
What about?
continue to show up.
Does he show up in the new Spider-Man movie that just came out?
So far as I know, he does not. But again, who knows about those end credit scenes?
Oh, that's true.
He will be in the new Ant-Man movie. We do know that for
Oh,
sure.
they're still making
But
Ant-Man.
there's still we got the third one coming,
My
baby.
God.
But
Oh my
Jonathan
goodness.
Majors, an incredible actor. He does a good job in this movie. He and Elba have a scene towards the end of this movie that kind of shakes up what we thought about some of the earlier actions in the film. And I think it's one of the highlights of the movie because it really takes it away from just trying to do like the end showdown is all about action, and it makes it more of a emotional thing that very much relies on the two of them being good actors, and they knock it out of the park. Zazie Beetz from Atlanta, and also the imaginary girlfriend in Joker. She's the love interest. She plays Mary Fields, who was in real life the one of the first post women in the country, the first Black one, and notorious for delivering the mail on time in Montana, which was a challenge back then.
Oh, goodness.
But she gets to show down with Regina King, who plays Trudy Smith, who's kind of the right-hand woman of Idris in this movie. One of the great things that James Samuel, the writer-director, does in this movie is he really kind of gives every actor at least one big scene where they get to, kind of chew into it and really get something out of it. King, not surprisingly, does the best out of anyone in this movie with that. Probably because I think as good as everyone in this movie is in general, I think she's the best actor in this movie. She has one where she describes kind of her start out as a murderer and why it happened. And that's the highlight of the film. She's fantastic. Lakeith Stanfield, again, also from Atlanta. He's great. There's a good dynamic with him where he and this other character, who's one of the good guys, are played by RJ Seiler. They kind of have this thing about which one of them is the quicker draw. And I think it gets paid off pretty well from a character standpoint in how that goes down and what happens to each character as this movie goes on. But yeah, just it's a good time. It is a little long. I would say this movie didn't need to be like 2 hours and 19 minutes, which running theme for a lot of movies this time, just now in general. Granted, like we just said, the Eternals in every MCU movie seems to be going at least 10 minutes too long. This one goes a little too long. It's probably most cinematically, it feels very Tarantino-esque with some of the stuff it does. One key difference, though, between this movie and, say, Django Unchained is no one ever says the N-word in this movie. One character almost says it, and things end for that guy the way you'd expect in a movie where the majority of the characters are Black people with guns. So, it's Tarantino-esque, but with filtered through an actual Black perspective as opposed to a white guy who a great writer who maybe falls in love with a word that he shouldn't fall in love with so hard. And I forgot to mention Delroy Lindo is also fantastic in this movie.
Okay, good. And that's on Netflix.
Yeah, that one's on Netflix. And a fun little thing for that is Delroy Lindo. I'm blanking on the character he plays in this movie for some reason. I gotta find the character. 1 second here, because it has a tie into Watchmen in a way, because
Regina King played in Watchmen, right? She was
right. He's playing Bass Reeves, who was the first Black U.S. Marshal. And if people remember from the show Watchmen, it opens up with a character watching a story about Bass Reeves in a movie theater. And so it's just kind of this interesting, it doesn't actually matter for either of those, but it's just an interesting dynamic that Bass Reeves also shows up in this, as does Regina King. So hopefully one day we'll actually just get a movie entirely about Bass Reeves, because if you just read his Wikipedia entry, you could, he had to chase down his own son for murder at one point in his life.
Jesus.
So yeah, the guy lived one hell of a life. He never was wounded throughout his career, although he had his belt shot off at one point, which I don't even understand how that happens and you don't get shot. But so yeah, give us a Bass Reeves movie, somebody in Hollywood, please.
Wes Anderson.
But yeah, The Harder They Fall, I'd say it's a solid B. It's an enjoyable movie, even if it's a little bit too long. But if you just want to watch a bunch of good actors shoot each other up in the Old West, I mean, it's a good time.
I like it. That one's on Netflix, so that probably is more accessible for people.
So yeah, pretty much anyone can watch it. If you don't have a Netflix account, what are you doing? Share it with someone. This isn't hard.
Oh yes, let's advocate that on our channel. Thank you, Joe. And there's Netflix sponsorship now.
They know. They wouldn't let you watch on 10 screens if you
You're
pay
right,
the, like,
exactly.
4K version. So
that is a good point. Briefly, because we're gonna wrap up soon, I wanted to ask you about a movie. So I remember one of the early on, Joe, when we first had you on, I told you my pick for what I thought a perfect movie was, The Master, with Joaquin Phoenix and Philip Seymour Hoffman. Remember that way back in the day, probably several months ago.
I do remember that one.
I think I feel the same way about Synecdoche, New York.
Oh, I have actually never seen.
Oh, well, good. So that can be your homework assignment.
I definitely need to. On a note, though, are you excited for Paul Thomas Anderson's new movie?
Okay, I am. Remind me of the name of it because I know what you're talking about.
So it's Licorice Pizza. And
yes, right. Yeah.
One of the two main characters is played by Cooper Hoffman, Philip Seymour Hoffman's son.
Yes,
so
no, I'm definitely going to see it because Paul Thomas Anderson is certainly among my favorite current working directors, and I think he's a master of the craft, and I definitely will. I definitely will see it, and I also will see the new Wes Anderson movie that we just talked about because I also love Wes Anderson. Are they related?
As far as I know, they are not.
I didn't think so. Maybe their names are spelled the same way. Who knows? Joe, I'm only an amateur at this. I'm just trying to keep up with it. Right? I'm only here for witty commentary and interesting juxtapositions. So, I mean, that's all that I provide.
I mean, it's an important role. So.
Well, it's why they pay me the big bucks. Okay, good. Well, everybody, that was three movies for crying out loud. I mean, what more can you ask of Jo Matz? He gave us 3 movies that we can all go watch. And I probably will see at least one of them between now and the next time you and I talk, or maybe not by then, but probably in the next 2 weeks I'll probably will see one of those. Probably Belfast, if I had to guess. But yeah, that'll be exciting. This will be good. And then Joe, your homework is to watch Synecdoche, New York. Okay. And what else? What other movies do I want to see? I told you I'm going to see Matrix Resurrections, obviously. I almost saw the new Resident Evil because I'm a fan of the film frame, of the video game.
Oh, I think Sam, for people who don't know, my brother Sam, I believe he just saw that movie. Oh, he was at least toying with seeing it last Friday. So
that was the
he can let us know.
Yeah, we're gonna have him on. He can what else, Joe? What else can I tell you? No, I think that will do it, folks. 3 movies that you can all go watch. Joe, I think you basically gave them all good reviews. B
plus and A-, which again, I think, depending on your perspective, again, if you like Wes Anderson, French Dispatch is clearly the one I would most recommend. Belfast, definitely the one to take your parents to. And then, if you're just looking for a more relaxing watch people shoot at each other, throw on The Harder They Fall.
All right, everybody. Well, Joe, another pleasant episode. A lot of fun as always. And of course, you can check out Jo Matz. He doesn't just talk on our podcast. He's also on Spotify. We're talking, amongst other things, he is your fantasy football go-to guy. And then also on Twitter at Joe E. Matz. You can follow him there. And he also has, do you still have the Winter Soldier podcast, or is that now finished? Are they still making episodes of that?
They're not still making episodes of that. Right now, what they're doing, the Hawkeye show which I'm not covering on any podcast, okay. But that is the current MCU TV show.
Very good. Well, fantasy football nonetheless, and of course, you can check out Jo Matz on Twitter and also find him here regularly. And of course, follow us at Roses_Rhetoric on Twitter and Instagram. And Joe Stanford, who cannot be here today, but I'm sure we'll be back next week. Find him at Jose4_Squarebo on Twitter and Instagram. Until next time, I'm Jimmy Hackett. Signing off for Joe, saying ciao.